Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Now, I know a lot of fans really hate the Midichlorians. They hated it when Lucas first created the concept in the prequels, and after Rian Johnson hopped on the bandwagon, even more people were converted to the anti-Midichlorian viewpoint. Some say that Midichlorians were an unnecessary detail that demystifies the Force and all of its qualities. To those people, I ask a simple question. If an advanced civilization like the Galactic Republic had people running around with superpowers, do you really think no one would test their bodies and try to figure out why they can do what they can do? A force that can manipulate our surroundings and objects surely can be detected by some kind of sensor, and the Republic has had tens of thousands of years to figure it out. There is another school of thought that doesn't like the idea of midichlorian counts because it quantifies people's abilities and ranks who can or cannot be a Jedi. Then there is the idea that the midichlorian count is something determined by genetics and usually passed from parents to their children. Society is becoming a whole lot nicer, a lot more understanding and accepting of, different people, and I really am behind this kind of overall transition of our human consciousness. At the same time, the reality is some of us are going to be born with advantages and some of us are going to be born with disadvantages. And we have to be honest and realistic about these limitations. It doesn't have to define who we are or even limit our goals in life, but we also shouldn't lie to ourselves. I mean, take a look at me, for instance. My midichlorian counts are so low that even after I have a Jedi kombucha juice, the Coruscant PD are still not able to detect any midichlorians in my bloodstream. Jedi kombucha juice is a mild stimulant drink that they released post-Order 66. Apparently has a lot of midichlorians in it, but it's not really activated. But even though my midichlorian counts are quite low, it doesn't stop me from pursuing my lofty dreams of becoming a black market Ewok meat smuggler. And so today I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at a list of midichlorian numbers for many of the major characters in Star Wars. Okay, so let's talk about normal people first. The average human being usually has under 2,500 midichlorians per cell, and about half of that if you live next to a 5G tower. At 2,500 midichlorians per cell, an individual has no force sensitivity at all. Owen Lawrence most likely had around 2,500 midichlorians per cell, as did individuals like Lando Calrissian and even Jango Fett and Boba Fett. Shmi Skywalker was said to have a midichlorian count closer to 3,000, but still not enough to be called force sensitive, or to explain why her son Anakin was so powerful. The majority of humans and other non-force sensitive species would fall into this range, and unfortunately would never feel the sensation of the force on their fingertips. Unless you're open to trying some not-so-ethical Jedi blood transfusions that became much more popular post-Order 66. When we get to around 5,000 midichlorians per cell, that's when we start to see some very basic force sensitivity. At this level of force sensitivity, an individual might demonstrate some precognition abilities and is able to predict incoming danger. Some individuals at this level of force sensitivity might never even find out that they are force sensitive and just kind of plow through life without ever knowing. Like Han Solo, who clearly exhibits some mild force sensitivity whether he realizes it or not. This explains why he was always such an excellent pilot and such a great shot. Even when he gets older and gray, Han Solo still has the ability to shoot someone without looking at them, and even manages to throw a full-grown man several meters across a room into a Raftar. If that is not a telekinesis-assisted throw, then I don't know what is. This is why we estimate that Han Solo has a midichlorian cell count of around 6,000, and potentially even more. Another individual who might qualify for this level of force sensitivity would be Finn. First, his ability to wield the lightsaber against Kylo Ren is pretty impressive, even though he is immediately defeated. A lightsaber has no weight in its blade, and it can be quite difficult to use for a non-force sensitive. Finn also seems to have a very close connection with Rey, and even senses her death after she kills Palpatine. Finn was also able to quickly figure out which Star Destroyer during the Battle of Exegol held the navigation tower that controlled the entire fleet, which is why we estimate that Finn's force sensitivity is at least around 5,000. Some species, like the Sith, not the Sith Order, but the Red Sith aliens, were naturally born with an affinity to the Force. This meant that the average Sith alien probably had around 5,000 midichlorians per cell. But due to the primitive warlike nature of the Sith species, they were never really able to develop the same type of training and understanding of the Force that the Republic had. And so when the first Jedi exiles appeared on their home planet of Korriban, despite having a Force-sensitive population, they were no match for these well-trained Dark Jedi. During the golden age of the Jedi Order, the Jedi were actually able to use the Republic's extensive healthcare system to find new recruits. A standard blood test during a medical checkup was enough to measure the midichlorian counts in one's red blood cells. An individual who tested at 3 to 4 times the midichlorian counts of a normal individual usually had their information sent straight to the Jedi Order. And then Jedi Seekers were sent out to recruit these babies. Sometimes Jedi were even equipped with blood analyzers, which could conduct field samples. That's why Qui-Gon Jinn decided to save Anakin from slavery, not because he was a child slave stuck in a very terrible situation. So somewhere around 8,000 midichlorians per cell would make an individual eligible for Jedi recruitment. Obviously, it's going to depend on the individual Jedi Seeker who is doing the recruiting. Now, the reality is not all Jedi become Padawans and are selected as apprentices by Jedi Knights and Masters. Not all Jedi get to go on fancy missions, boink senators, and save the galaxy, or destroy it. Most Jedi who do not pass the initiate trials or are selected as a Padawan apprentice will most likely join one of the service corps. You have the Agricultural Corps, the Exploration Corps, the Medical Corps, and the Educational Corps. While these individuals might have lacked the fighting abilities and powers of more powerful Jedi like Coleman Trevor and Anakin Skywalker, they were still essential to the day-to-day operations of the Jedi Order and the various missions the Jedi Knights were going on. For instance, Chief Librarian and Jedi Master Jocasta Nu might not have been the most powerful Jedi, but she had an extremely intimate knowledge about the Jedi archives and would help anyone who asked for her assistance within the Great Library. Even though her combat skills were poor and her telekinesis was weak, Jocasta Nu still did not hesitate to sacrifice her life to defend the Jedi archives, and even managed to preserve a secret stash of information that Luke Skywalker would one day find and use to restart the Jedi Order. We estimate that Jocasta Nu's midichlorian count was most likely in the 9,000s.
It's over 9,000!
Which is pretty mild, to be honest. But most Jedi like Jocasta Nu who found themselves in the service corps or on the path to becoming a consular Jedi were in this power range. Many of the Inquisitors trained by Vader were most likely around this level as well. These were usually former Jedi or Temple Guards who were seen as inadequate to become apprentices, like Darth Tyrannus or Darth Maul, who were technically Sith Lords. Some of the weaker Inquisitors like the 6th brother or the 10th brother were most likely at sub 9,000 midichlorian counts. It also didn't help that Vader would disfigure all of the Inquisitors during their training and cut off their limbs. This usually lowered the midichlorian counts of an individual, something he should be quite familiar with. The Grand Inquisitor was the toughest of all of the Inquisitors, and he definitely fought at a different level. He was easily able to defeat a entry-level Jedi like Jocasta Nu. He was even able to toy with promising Jedi Padawan Kanan Jarrus before he was able to reconnect himself fully with the Force. The Grand Inquisitor was actually a former Jedi Temple Guardian, which means he was very well versed with various forms of lightsaber combat and also specifically trained to stop rogue Jedi. The Jedi Temple Guards not only protected the Jedi within the temple from outside dangers, it also protected the Jedi from themselves. It's very likely that the Grand Inquisitor was punching above his weights in fights due to his familiarity with lightsaber combat. We estimate his true force power to be around 12,000 per cell. Combined with his fighting abilities, the Grand Inquisitor was able to defeat most of the surviving Jedi Padawan or non-combat oriented Jedi he encountered. Now, Jedi at the same level as the Grand Inquisitor will have showed off enough power to be chosen as an apprentice and start their pathway towards the title of Jedi Knight. Individuals like Plo Koon or Kit Fisto might fit in this category. We estimate their force abilities at around 13,000 per cell, which would make them definitely above average for a Jedi and also put them in the elite class of Jedi Knights, who were basically the individuals who were taking on the most dangerous Jedi missions around the galaxy. Another individual who falls into this level would actually be Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's a great example of a very overachieving Jedi. Despite having a midichlorian count in the 13,000s, he was able to defeat much more powerful Force users. This is because he utilized the Form 3 defense form of combat, which sought to tire out the other combatant he was fighting. An individual like Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was only above average for a Jedi when it came to midichlorian counts, would most likely get pretty tired out by a more force-intensive combat form like Form 4, Ataru, which involves all sorts of crazy jumps and force-assisted moves. Form 3 conserved Obi-Wan's force powers, and he was able to use his discipline and patience to defeat extremely powerful force users like Anakin Skywalker, although he did have the high ground and some luck that he totally doesn't believe in as well. Against the more traditional power force user like Count Dooku, who was also an extremely disciplined duelist, Obi-Wan Kenobi never really stood a chance, both times he fought him. Yet Obi-Wan Kenobi is a clear example that your midi-chlorian count does not define how successful you are in life and on the battlefield. We are all born with a set midi-chlorian count. It's really up to us how we harness and use that power. Sith Lord Darth Tenebrous, master of Darth Plagueis, once noted that a being born of pure force should have a count of 15,000 or more midi-chlorians per cell. This is generally accepted as the maximum amount of midi-chlorians that you can have in your cells, unless you are a freak of nature or have had some artificial boost in your midi-chlorian levels. At 15,000 midi-chlorians per cell, we begin to see more interesting force abilities such as Tuta Minis, the ability to absorb the energy of a lightsaber or blaster bolt. We also begin to see that these types of individuals are fighting at a completely different level of lightsaber combat. Now, we know that the Jedi and Sith generally use precognition to see incoming blaster bolts or lightsaber swings. At a certain level, a Force user will actually fall into a trance and let the Force dictate their movements during a battle. Most Jedi Knights are able to do this, but the ones that are reaching a midi-chlorian count of 15,000 can do this at an entirely different level. Darth Tyrannus or Count Dooku most likely had a midi-chlorian count of around 14,000. At a young age, he was already incredibly gifted with telekinesis and had surpassed many of his older peers. Someone like Mace Windu, who managed to invent Form 7 Vapad, probably had an even higher midi-chlorian count at around 16,000. Vapad requires a massive amount of dark side energy to pass through the user. Only a very powerful Force user like Mace Windu could insulate himself and keep his body and mind from being damaged from the dark side of the Force. Beyond 15,000 midi-chlorians per cell, we're really reaching like Super Saiyan levels of craziness when it comes to force power. These individuals are not normal, and are once-in-a-generation type anomalies. Darth Sidious or Sheev Palpatine was most likely pushing 20,000 midi-chlorians in his own bloodstream. Not only was the Dark Lord able to completely hide his force abilities from other extremely powerful Jedi, he was also able to defeat 3 Jedi Masters in the 12,000 midi-chlorian range within seconds. At 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell, it becomes pretty hard to see these individuals when they are engaged fully in combat. When Grandmaster Yoda, who also most likely was pushing 20,000 midi-chlorians, faces off against Palpatine, onlookers would have had a hard time keeping track of what was going on in their battle. But then again, even these two individuals lacked the pure force power that Anakin Skywalker had. It was rumored that the Chosen One had 25,000 plus midi-chlorians per cell. There are rumors that Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious bent the midi-chlorians to their will and made them create life out of nothing to make Anakin. But as we've seen in the battle between a mere mortal Jedi like Obi-Wan and Anakin, even having the highest record amount of midi-chlorians won't save you from stupidity. And even though Palpatine was far more powerful than Mace Windu, the latter Jedi's use of Form 7 was able to reflect Palpatine's power back into his own face, showing us that with proper training and technique, it wasn't impossible to overcome someone far more powerful. So there you have it, guys. That is our unofficial kind of guide to midi-chlorian levels, and the 6 categories that we set forth are not really canon at all, because unfortunately a lot of the Jedi died after Order 66 and their bodies were turned into health drinks and stuff like that. So we don't actually have the records of these individuals in their blood. So a lot of this is kind of guessing. So yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about all of this, including what level you guys are in when it comes to midi-chlorian counts. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. Now, as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.